The cold had a way of seeping into your bones in Hollow Creek, a chill that didn't just lower your body temperature, but seemed to freeze the very blood in your veins. Thomas Sterling pulled his heavy woolen coat tighter around himself, his breath pluming in the frigid air like miniature ghosts. He was a journalist, a man who traded in facts and figures, in the concrete and the tangible. He had come to this isolated village, nestled deep within an impassable mountain range, to document their decennial harvest festival, a tradition that had purportedly remained unchanged for centuries. But the mountain had other plans. A sudden, violent avalanche had blocked the only road in or out, trapping him in Hollow Creek. The villagers, rather than showing concern, seemed almost pleased. Their smiles were tight, their eyes calculating. They offered him a room in the local inn, a drafty, creaking wooden structure that smelled faintly of old earth and dried herbs. "You're just in time for the festival, Mr. Sterling," the innkeeper, a wiry man named Elias, had said, his voice a dry rustle like dead leaves. "It's a rare honor for an outsider." Thomas had nodded, suppressing a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. There was something wrong here. The isolation was oppressive, a physical weight pressing down on him. The village itself was a cluster of gray, weathered buildings huddled together as if seeking warmth, their windows dark and uninviting. The people moved with a silent, synchronized purpose, their faces blank masks. As the days bled into each other, the preparations for the festival intensified. Thomas watched, his journalist's instinct tingling with a mix of curiosity and growing unease. He saw women weaving intricate, grotesque effigies out of dried stalks and animal bones. He heard chants echoing from the woods at midnight, guttural sounds that seemed to resonate in the marrow of his bones. He tried to interview the locals, to peel back the layers of their secretive traditions, but they offered only vague platitudes. "We give back to the earth, so it may give to us," they repeated, like a mantra. The climax of the festival arrived on the winter solstice, the longest night of the year. The village square was lit by towering bonfires, casting long, twisting shadows that danced like demonic figures on the surrounding buildings. The villagers, clad in heavy furs and wearing masks carved from bone and dark wood, formed a massive circle around a central pyre. Elias stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with a manic light. He held a silver chalice, its surface etched with symbols that made Thomas's eyes ache when he tried to focus on them. "The time has come," Elias proclaimed, his voice echoing across the silent square. "The earth hungers and we must feed it." Thomas, hidden in the shadows of a nearby alley, watched with a growing sense of dread. The air was thick with the scent of burning pine and something else, something metallic and sweet: blood. Two villagers dragged a struggling figure into the center of the circle. It was a young woman, her face pale with terror. Thomas recognized her as a girl who had served him food at the inn. "No, please," she screamed, her voice tearing through the silent night. But the villagers were deaf to her pleas. They began to chant, the guttural sounds rising in volume and intensity. The earth beneath their feet seemed to vibrate, a low thrumming that resonated in Thomas's chest. Elias raised the chalice, a dark liquid sloshing within. "We offer this vessel to the Deep One, that it may slumber for another 10 years, and that our crops may be bountiful." Thomas knew he had to act. He couldn't just stand there and watch a murder. He lunged forward, bursting from the shadows, a desperate cry tearing from his throat. "Stop," he yelled. The chanting abruptly ceased. The villagers turned to look at him, their masked faces expressionless. Elias lowered the chalice, a cold smile twisting his lips. "Ah, the outsider," Elias said, his voice smooth and deadly. "We were hoping you would join us." Before Thomas could react, rough hands seized him from behind. He struggled, but there were too many of them. They dragged him toward the center of the circle, throwing him to the ground beside the terrified young woman. "You don't understand," Thomas gasped, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. "This is madness." "Madness," Elias scoffed. "This is survival. The Deep One demands a sacrifice, a willing soul from within and a soul from without. It is the balance." The ground trembled violently now, the low thrumming growing into a deafening roar. Thomas looked down and saw a fissure opening in the earth beneath the central pyre. A foul, suffocating stench billowed from the crack, the smell of ancient decay and rotting flesh. From the darkness below, something began to emerge. It was a shape that defied description, a writhing mass of tentacles and eyes, glistening with a viscous, black slime. The sheer wrongness of it sent a jolt of pure, undiluted terror through Thomas's system. His mind rebelled, unable to process the impossible geometry of the creature. The villagers dropped to their knees, their chants reaching a fever pitch. Elias stepped forward, his eyes wide with a terrifying devotion. "Take them, O Deep One," he cried, raising his arms. "Take them and be satiated." The creature surged forward, its tentacles lashing out with terrifying speed. One wrapped around the young woman, lifting her into the air. She screamed, a sound of pure agony that was abruptly cut short as the creature dragged her down into the fissure. Thomas scrambled backward, his boots scrabbling for purchase on the frozen earth. But the creature's attention was now on him. A tentacle, thick as a tree trunk and lined with razor-sharp suckers, whipped around his ankle, lifting him off the ground. He thrashed wildly, but the grip was unbreakable. The creature pulled him closer, the stench of decay overwhelming his senses. He looked into the writhing mass of eyes, seeing nothing but a cold, ancient hunger. "No," Thomas screamed, a final, desperate plea to an uncaring universe. But there was no one left to hear him. The village of Hollow Creek remained silent, the villagers watching with impassive faces as the outsider was dragged down into the dark, frozen earth. The fissure closed with a sickening crunch, leaving no trace of the horror that had just transpired. The bonfires burned low, casting long shadows across the empty square. The decennial harvest festival was complete. The earth had been fed, and Hollow Creek would survive for another 10 years, isolated and silent in its dark devotion to the Deep One. The snow began to fall again, a gentle, pristine blanket that covered the village, hiding the blood and the horror beneath a layer of white. It was a beautiful, peaceful scene, a stark contrast to the terror that lurked just beneath the surface. And in the depths below, the ancient entity slumbered, satiated for now, waiting for the day when it would hunger once more. The village of Hollow Creek would be ready. They always were. The isolation of the village was absolute. No one would come looking for Thomas Sterling. No one would ever know the truth of the harvest festival. His story, his facts and figures were lost forever, buried beneath the snow and the earth, a silent testament to the unspeakable horrors that lurked in the dark corners of the world. The cold seeped deeper into the frozen ground, a silent guardian of the ancient secret. Hollow Creek remained a small, forgotten village, a place where the lines between the natural and the supernatural blurred, where the old ways held sway, and where the true nature of reality was a terrifying, incomprehensible abyss. The villagers returned to their homes, their faces blank, their eyes vacant. They had fulfilled their duty. The cycle would continue. The earth would provide, and they would survive. It was a simple, brutal existence, a life built on blood and sacrifice, a dark bargain with an ancient evil. And as the last ember of the bonfires died, plunging the village into absolute darkness, a low, rumbling groan echoed from deep beneath the earth, a sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the world. It was a sound of satisfaction, a sound of anticipation. The harvest was over, but the hunger remained, and it would always remain, waiting, watching, slumbering beneath the frozen earth of Hollow Creek.